Today, we're going to explore one of human beings' most primitive fears, with 7 horror stories involving people lost in the middle of nowhere. Let's find out what can happen when we're completely alone, with no cell phone signal, no GPS, and no sign of civilization around. So sit back, make sure you know exactly where you are, and let's get this hair-raising journey started. Oh, and before you get lost too, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave your like. This really helps the channel, and make sure you don't miss any scary content like this. Let's go. The Forgotten Road. The Scottish sky quickly darkened when Eliza and Thomas Harper's GPS failed. The American couple, celebrating 10 years of marriage with a trip through the Highlands, found themselves on an increasingly narrow country road, surrounded by heather-covered hills and gathering mist. "We should have stayed on the A82, muttered Thomas, leaning over the steering wheel of the rental car, trying to see through the light rain that was beginning to fall. According to the physical map, there is a village called Glian Dubh a few kilometers away. We can stop there and ask for directions." Eliza nodded, pressing her coat to her body. The car's heater was working poorly, and the damp September cold penetrated to the bone. Through the fogged window, the landscape became increasingly wild and desolate. After a sharp turn, they saw yellow lights in the distance. Glian Dubh turned out to be a collection of grey stone houses around a central square, with an ancient church and a single bright tavern. There were no welcome signs or road signs. The place seemed to exist in its own time, disconnected from the modern world. They parked in front of the Wanderer's Rest Tavern. The interior was warmed by a sturdy fireplace with dark wood tables and walls decorated with old tools and faded photographs. The few customers, all locals due to their thick accents, interrupted their conversations when the couple entered. "Good evening," greeted the barkeep, a middle-aged man with a weathered face. "Lost on the back roads, I presume." Thomas explained the situation while Eliza observed the environment. Something about the atmosphere made her uneasy. Perhaps the lingering looks from the residents, or the silence that fell whenever she tried to participate in the conversation. "They won't be able to get back to the main road today," said the publican, introducing himself as Callum. "The bridge becomes impassable in the rain. We have rooms available up here if you want to stay the night." Without many options, they accepted the offer. The room was simple but clean, with a 4-poster bed and windows overlooking the central square. As they prepared for bed, Eliza noticed something disturbing about the framed photographs in the hallway. Faces of strangers, clearly. Tourists from different eras, all with uncomfortable expressions. In each photo, the same residents appeared in the background, virtually unchanged despite the decades between images. "Thomas, look at this," she called, but was interrupted by knocking on the door. It was an elderly lady, introducing herself as Agnes, bringing hot tea. "To ward off the cold," he explained with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tomorrow we will have the selection. You are special guests." "Selection?" Thomas asked. "Our annual festival, an ancient tradition." Agnes hesitated. Very old. After his departure, Eliza refused to drink the tea. "There's something wrong here. Did you see how they're watching us? And those photos in the hallway?" Thomas tried to calm her, attributing her discomfort to fatigue from the journey. Eventually, they fell asleep to the sound of the intensifying rain. Eliza woke up with a start in the middle of the night. The square, visible through the window, was lit by torches. Residents gathered in a circle, wearing traditional Scottish clothing. In the center, Callum spoke with sweeping gestures, occasionally pointing toward the tavern. "Thomas, wake up," she whispered, shaking her husband. "Something's happening out there." As they watched, Agnes appeared in the square carrying an antique box. From it, he took photographs that he showed to the crowd. Eliza froze when she recognized a photo of them taken when they arrived, without them realizing. "We need to get out of here now," he decided. Silently, they collected their belongings. The hallway was deserted, but when they went down the stairs, they found the main door locked. The back door in the kitchen, too. All the windows on the ground floor had old iron bars that were impossible to remove. "We're trapped," Thomas said, panic rising in his voice. It was then that they noticed a disturbing detail in the photographs of the corridor. Some of the tourists appeared in multiple photos over the years, gradually appearing more integrated into the community, their gazes becoming as blank as those of the local residents. The next morning they were woken up by Callum. "The selection will begin in 1 hour, he announced. "Dress appropriately." The square was decorated with ancient symbols and a central platform. The residents, about 40 people, formed a semicircle. Eliza and Thomas were positioned in the center, along with a couple of German cyclists who had arrived in the early hours of the morning. Agnes explained the ritual. "Glean Dube has existed for centuries, isolated and preserved. To keep our lineage strong, we annually select travelers to become part of us. 2 will stay, 2 will go. The choice is the community's." The horror of the situation became clear. Villagers would vote on which visitors to hold prisoner, forcibly integrating them into the community through arranged marriages, while the others would be released to keep the village secret. During the ceremony, Eliza noticed that some residents had subtle foreign accents and looks of resignation, former selected travelers who were now participating in the ritual that had imprisoned them. "Voting has begun." Eliza, desperate, whispered to Thomas, "If they separate us, find help. Don't go back alone." When the votes were counted, the verdict came. The German couple would be released. Eliza and Thomas would remain at Glean Dube. As they were taken to separate homes, Eliza saw her future in the blank expressions of the former selected. He understood that the true story of Glean Dube was older and more sinister than he imagined. A community that had survived for centuries through the new blood of lost travelers, remaining isolated from the world and its laws. The abandoned lighthouse. The biting wind from the North Sea whipped the rocky coast of the Isle of Skye when 3 friends spotted the lighthouse for the first time. Megan, freelance photographer specializing in abandoned places. Dylan, his younger brother and oceanography student. And Kieran, their childhood friend and maritime history enthusiast. The 3 had planned the trip for months, drawn by the legend of Store Point Lighthouse. "There it is," Kieran pointed out, consulting his old map. "Officially decommissioned in 1987 after the last lighthouse keeper mysteriously disappeared. The lighthouse stood alone on the island's most extreme promontory, a white and red stone tower worn down by time and the sea. It looked abandoned, with broken windows and peeling paint, perfect for Megan's Forgotten Sentinels photo series. "We must hurry," warned Dylan, watching the dark clouds that were quickly approaching. "That storm looks serious." They climbed the steep path to the lighthouse, reaching the main entrance as the first heavy drops began to fall. The door was locked, but a broken side window offered easy access. The inside smelled of mold and salt and something else, a metallic odor that Megan couldn't identify. The spiral staircase led to the different levels. First the lighthouse keeper's living room, then the bedroom, the kitchen, and finally the lantern room at the top. To the group's surprise, although covered in dust, the rooms did not appear completely abandoned. There were subtle signs of occupation. Not so old ashes in the fireplace, tin cans with recent dates, a notebook with notes, dated the previous month. "Someone was here," Megan muttered, photographing the evidence. "Or still is." The storm quickly intensified, turning into a ferocious gale that made it impossible to leave the lighthouse. They decided to spend the night there, taking turns watching. Dylan took the first, while Megan and Kieran tried to rest in the lighthouse. Keeper's room. It was during his shift that Dylan made his first disturbing discovery. In the lantern room, he noticed that the rotating mechanism, supposedly deactivated for decades, showed signs of recent use. Even more alarming, the lighthouse light had been modified. Special lenses distorted the signal, turning it into something that could confuse navigators rather than guide them. While examining a built-in closet, he found a leather-bound diary. The first entries dated back to 1986, written by the last official lighthouse keeper, Malcolm Sinclair. The notes, gradually, described a growing obsession with shipwrecks and the beauty of ships smashed against the rocks. The entries ended abruptly in January 1987, the date of his alleged disappearance. But then, after blank pages, new entries appeared, starting in 1990 and continuing through the previous week. The handwriting was the same. Dylan rushed to wake the others, but stopped when he heard a noise coming from the spiral staircase. Heavy footsteps slowly ascended. He hid behind an old generator while the door opened. An elderly man entered, drenched from the rain, carrying a leaky bag. Dylan held his breath, watching the man, presumably Malcolm, turn on the modified flashlight and adjust it precisely. Through the flashlight window, Dylan saw what the man was watching so intently: a small fishing boat fighting the storm, coming dangerously close to the treacherous rocks below the lighthouse. When he managed to get back to the room and alert Megan and Kieran, the three made an even more disturbing discovery. The bag the lighthouse keeper was carrying contained personal items, wallets, jewelry, documents from dozens of different victims. On a wall map, small red markings indicated shipwreck locations, all within a radius of the lighthouse, all on stormy nights. "He didn't disappear," Kieran whispered. "He faked his own disappearance so he could remain here, unsupervised. And ever since then, it has been luring vessels to their deaths," Megan added, the horror evident in her voice. "They needed to prevent the imminent sinking, but also escape with their lives." They split up. Dylan and Kieran went upstairs to deactivate the deceptive light, while Megan would try to use the old radio they had found in the living room to alert the Coast Guard. The confrontation was inevitable. Malcolm, upon realizing the interference, revealed himself to be not only lucid, but calculating. He explained with disturbing calm how he had selected vessels for decades, studying routes and weather patterns to maximize his chances. "The sea demands sacrifices," he stated, wielding a rusty harpoon. "Always required. I just help choose which ones they will be." The fight that followed was brief and desperate. Kieran managed to deactivate the light while Dylan distracted the lighthouse keeper. Megan, after contacting the Coast Guard, returned in time to see Malcolm fall down the spiral staircase during the confrontation, his body shattering on the rocks in the same way his victims have over the years. The storm abated. At dawn, the fishing boat had managed to move away from the rocks after the deceptive light was turned off. The Coast Guard arrived hours later, finding the three traumatized friends and evidence of Malcolm's crimes: 37 shipwrecks, more than 50 victims over 3 decades. The case of the Ghost Lighthouse of Skye, as it was called by the press, shocked the maritime community. Subsequent investigations revealed that Malcolm had bribed inspectors to keep the officially decommissioned lighthouse on the books, while continuing to operate it clandestinely. For Megan, Dylan, and Kieran, the photography adventure turned into a nightmare. The photographs that Megan managed to preserve became crucial evidence in the case that reopened investigations into dozens of accidental shipwrecks in the region. The marked trail. The morning mist still hung over the mountains when 5 friends began hiking the Forgotten Pass Trail, a little-known route deep in Fiordland National Park. The group was made up of trail veterans: Sarah, a 32-year-old professional guide, his brother Michael, a nature photographer, the couple Olivia and James, environmental biologists, and Liam, longtime friend and doctor. According to the map, this trail is not officially maintained by the park, Sarah explained, checking her GPS. It was used by Maori hunters centuries ago, then abandoned in the 1970s. The plan was ambitious: 3 days traversing a rarely visited region, documenting the unique biodiversity and testing a new mapping app developed by James. The adventure promised untouched landscapes and the kind of solitude that only the most remote regions of New Zealand still offered. The first hour of walking passed without incident, following a crystal-clear stream that meandered between ancient trees. It was Olivia who noticed the first markings, small red symbols similar to stylized arrows, painted on strategically placed stones. "Strange," she commented, photographing one of the marks. "I thought this trail wasn't officially maintained." "Maybe they're old markings," Michael suggested, "or some group of hikers trying to ease the route." They continued following the markings, which appeared at regular intervals, always indicating forks or detours. The path gradually became steeper and more challenging, moving away from the original route indicated on Sarah's map. "That's not right," she said after consulting the GPS. "We're moving away from the main valley. These marks are taking us north, not east like we should." Liam examined one of the newer markings. "The paint looks fresh," he observed, lightly touching the symbol. "And look at this, it's not just arrows. There are little numbers underneath." Re-examining previous markings, they confirmed each symbol had an almost imperceptible sequential number. They were at the 17 mark now. "It's like someone is counting our progress," murmured James, the discomfort evident in his voice. They decided to abandon the markings and return to the original trail. As they turned around, however, they noticed something disturbing. Dew markings had appeared behind them, in places that were certainly empty when they passed. "Someone's following us," Sarah concluded, her hand instinctively reaching for the hiking knife on her belt. "And he wants us to follow a specific path." They accelerated their pace, trying to return to the starting point. The forest, once welcoming, seemed to close in around them. The silence was oppressive. No birds, no insects, just the sound of their own quickened breaths and branches occasionally snapping in the distance. At dusk, forced to set up camp, they took a defensive position against a rock formation. During the night, they took turns guarding shifts. It was during Michael's shift that he saw, briefly illuminated by his flashlight, a slender figure moving through the trees, too fast to be identified. The next morning, they found a macabre gift, an old hiking backpack, torn and stained, hanging from a nearby tree. Inside, a diary dated 2018, belonging to an Australian hiker. The last few entries described red markings and the growing feeling of being guided somewhere. "We need to get out of here now," Sarah decided. Abandoning part of their equipment to gain speed, they headed in the direction they believed would lead back to the main trail. Each fork, however, had new markings, some newly painted, all numbered sequentially. In the early afternoon, Liam tripped over a nearly invisible wire stretched between two trees. The metallic sound of something being activated echoed through the forest. Seconds later, a heavy net fell from above, missing the group by inches. "It's a trap," gasped Olivia. "Someone is hunting." But it wasn't an animal that was targeted. It was the group. Running now, they have abandoned any pretense of following a specific route. Sarah's GPS showed they were at least 15 kilometers from their starting point in increasingly rough terrain. They tried using the emergency radio, but found only static. At dusk, exhausted and disoriented, they arrived at a small clearing where they found the most disturbing evidence: a rustic cabin, almost camouflaged by the vegetation. On the outer walls, dozens of backpacks, boots and hiking equipment, trophies from previous hunts. As they were deciding what to do, they heard a melodic whistle approaching. They quickly hid among dense bushes, watching a thin and muscular, middle-aged man emerge from the forest. He wore worn-out clothes in shades of green and carried a modern crossbow. On his belt were several knives of different sizes. The man entered the cabin, leaving the door open. Sarah signaled them to retreat. Silently, but James, trying to get a photo as evidence, accidentally broke a dry branch. The hunter emerged instantly, the beast raised high. "Visitors," he said in an accent they couldn't identify. "They're finally here. Number 23 complete." They then realized the meaning of the numbers on the markings. They were not just counts of progress, but of victims. They would be numbers 23 to 27. What followed was a desperate chase through the darkened forest. The hunter, clearly familiar with the terrain, seemed to be in several places at once, guiding them with strategic whistles and noises to areas where traps were set. James fell into one of them, a hole covered in foliage that hid sharp stakes. His screams alerted the others, who managed to pull him out with serious leg injuries. Carrying James, the group continued to flee through the night, guided only by Sarah's compass and determination to survive. At dawn, they found a wider trail, and eventually a ranger station. The subsequent investigation revealed a disturbing story. Since 2015, at least 22 hikers had gone missing in different areas of Fiordland. The cabin belonged to Thomas Blackwood, a former forest guide fired after allegations of erratic behavior. He had turned his knowledge of the park into a deadly game, marking false trails to lure hikers into his hunting territory. What's up, guys? The stories of people lost in the middle of nowhere are chilling even now, aren't they? If you're enjoying these scary stories, take the opportunity to take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave your like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to continue bringing you more chilling content. Now, shall we go back to the next stories? There's still a lot of fear ahead. 4. Apanino Deserto. The heat was suffocating when the Cooper family's Ford territory made its first strange noise. A metallic bang, followed by a series of rhythmic thuds, and finally a cloud of white smoke escaping from the hood. David Cooper, a university professor from Melbourne on vacation with his family, drove the vehicle to the shoulder of the Stuart Highway, the road that crossed the vast Australian desert. "Damn," he muttered, watching the smoking engine. "I think it's the head gasket." Rebecca, his wife, checked her cell phone. No signal. We're at least 200 kilometers from Alice Springs. In the back seat, Emma and Jake, ages 12 and 9, looked apprehensively out the window. The surrounding landscape was bleak, red plains stretching to the horizon, interrupted only by gnarled bushes and distant rock formations. The car's thermometer read 43 degrees C. "How long until another car passes?" Emma asked, her voice betraying concern. "On this road? It could take hours," David replied, trying to sound calm as he distributed water from the gallons they had thankfully stockpiled. It was 2 hours of agonizing waiting until they saw a cloud of dust on the horizon. An old tow truck approached, screeching to a halt beside them. The driver, a middle-aged man with tanned skin and stubble, introduced himself as Mick. "Engine problems, huh? I'm a mechanic in Warburton. I can tow you there. Fix the car first thing." "Tomorrow." David hesitated. Warburton was not on their maps, but Mick explained that it was a small outpost, 50 kilometers to the east, off the main road. "There's a simple but decent motel. Better than spending the night in the desert, without many options," and with the sun starting to set, the Coopers accepted the offer. As Mick secured the car to the tow truck, Rebecca noticed something strange. Several stickers from different countries decorated the side of the truck, as if collected from previous travelers. The trip was tense. Mick spoke little, responding with monosyllables to attempts at conversation. They turned from the main road onto a secondary road, then onto a dirt trail that wound between increasingly taller rock formations. Warburton turned out to be smaller than they expected. A handful of faded buildings clustered around an old gas station. Mick's workshop was in the back, a metal warehouse surrounded by carcasses of vehicles in various stages of dismantling. "You can stay at the motel," Mick said, pointing to a low building with dusty windows. "I'll start working on the car at dawn. Tomorrow." The motel was basic. 2 connected rooms, simple beds, a shared bathroom with warm water. There was no receptionist, just keys left on a table. The thin walls did not hide the constant hum of diesel generators. As the children tried to sleep, David and Rebecca talked in hushed tones. "Something doesn't feel right," she whispered. "Did you see those cars outside? Some of them look like they've been there for years. And I didn't see anyone other than Mick. Where are the other residents?" Unable to sleep, David decided to check his own car. He left silently, crossing the dusty terrain to the workshop. The door was ajar, yellowish light escaping through the shoe cracks. Inside, he found not only his Ford, but disturbing evidence. Documents from several vehicles piled on a table, foreign passports, open suitcases with belongings scattered around. On a board on the wall, a map marked with red dots along the highway. Locations of previous breakdowns, even more alarming. In one corner, a macabre collection of personal objects organized like trophies, watches, rings, children's toys. Each item labeled with a date. The sound of footsteps made David quickly hide under a counter. Mick entered, accompanied by another younger man, equally sunburned. "The Coopers give 4. "Good number," said Mick, consulting a list. "Japanese alone. Didn't yield much. And the car? It looks new," replied the other. "Valuable parts. We'll send them to Adelaide next week, along with the clean documents." David understood the horror of the situation. Warburton was not an outpost, but a trap. Mick didn't cause breakdowns. He patrolled the highway, looking for travelers already in trouble. Easy prey in the unforgiving desert. Backing up slowly, David bumped into a tool that fell with a metallic clang. The men fell silent immediately. "We've got company," muttered Mick. David desperately ran back to the motel, waking up his family. "We need to get out now. They're not mechanics, they're predators." Taking only the essentials and the gallons of water, the Coopers escaped through the back window. Rebecca led the children while David looked for any vehicle they could use. They found an old pickup truck, keys in the ignition, clearly prepared for the next customer. As David started the engine, headlights illuminated the dust. Mick and his partner had discovered the escape. What followed was a frantic chase through the desert trails. David, guided by the stars, tried to return to the main highway while Mick pursued them, knowing every shortcut in the territory. They managed to reach the Stewart Highway at dawn, encountering a highway patrol who, initially skeptical, became alarmed by the specific details provided by David. The subsequent investigation revealed the horrifying truth. For nearly a decade, Mick Thornton and his nephew had operated their macabre scheme. Authorities have found evidence of at least 18 missing travelers, foreign tourists mainly, whose disappearances have been blamed on the natural dangers of the outback. The case of the Desert Mechanics, as it became known, shocked Australia and led to changes in Stewart Highway safety protocols, with more frequent patrols and mandatory checkpoints. The Silent Valley, the Scottish sky alternated between bright blue and stormy grey as Elena Novak parked her rented Jeep on the last access road before the trailhead. An award-winning photographer specializing in remote landscapes, Elena had traveled from Prague to the Scottish Highlands after discovering mention of a rarely visited valley in the Cairngorms, a location that promised virgin views for her. "New book, no signal," he muttered, checking his cell phone before putting it away. It was expected. Part of the appeal of these places was precisely their isolation. He adjusted his heavy backpack, containing his professional photography equipment, checked his portable GPS and printed map, and started hiking. The trail started out well-marked, but gradually became wilder. Elena followed confidently, occasionally consulting her notes based on reports from local mountaineers. After 3 hours of walking, he reached a natural viewpoint that offered the first view of the valley. It was more impressive than he had imagined, a natural amphitheater of rugged mountains embracing a verdant valley, with a lake of dark waters in the center. Low clouds slid between the peaks, creating a constant play of light and shadow. He carefully descended into the valley, choosing a flat spot near the lake to set up camp. As she worked, she had the strange sensation of being watched. He looked around, but only saw the gentle movement of vegetation in the wind. He spent the rest of the day photographing, moving around the valley to capture different angles. The silence was almost absolute. No plane crossed the sky, no noise of civilization reached that isolated corner. It was while reviewing the images on the display that he noticed something disturbing. In one of the panoramic photos, a distant figure appeared at the top of a hill. Zooming in on the image, he made out the unmistakable outline of a person with what appeared to be a camera or binoculars. Elena felt a chill. I had encountered no one on the trail, and the valley was supposedly rarely visited. Maybe another photographer with the same idea, but something about the figure's posture, directly facing her, suggested it was no coincidence. At dusk, he set up his tent and prepared a simple meal. The feeling of being watched intensified. Twice, he thought he saw movement in the nearby tree line. Once he was sure he heard the distant click of a camera shutter. During the night, she was awakened by sounds around the tent, light, almost deliberate footsteps circling her camp. When he finally mustered the courage to look, he saw no one, but noticed that his outer backpack had been opened and rummaged through. The next morning, he found something that chilled his blood, a printed photograph left on his boots outside the tent. The image showed Elena sleeping inside the tent, a photo clearly taken at night, through the thin fabric, using some kind of thermal camera. Trembling hands gathered the equipment as he planned to leave immediately. That's when he noticed another anomaly. His portable GPS was missing. All that was left was the printed map, but without the GPS, navigating the rugged terrain would be significantly more difficult. She followed what she believed to be the way back, but after an hour she realized she was being guided deeper into the valley. Subtle markings that weren't there the day before appeared strategically. Branches arranged in patterns, rocks piled up, small cuts in vegetation. He decided to ignore the markings and follow his compass. He climbed an elevation to get a better view of the terrain and plan an alternative route. That was when he saw in the distance a rustic cabin partially hidden by trees, a building that did not appear on any map. Professional curiosity fought against the survival instinct. He approached cautiously, hiding behind rock formations. The cabin looked old, but kept in good condition. Through a dirty window, he glimpsed the interior, walls covered with photographs. With growing horror, he recognized the pattern. They were images of people, hikers, photographers, mountaineers, all clearly taken without the subject's knowledge. The oldest photos, yellowed with age, dated decades ago. The most recent ones included Elena arriving in the valley the day before. Even more disturbing. Next to each series of photos, small collections of personal objects, watches, cameras, documents, trophies, a noise behind her. Elena quickly turned to see a man of unknown age, wearing worn-out clothes in shades that blended in perfectly with his surroundings. He carried an old camera and a hunting rifle. "You have a good eye for composition," he said in a thick local accent, but he chose the wrong frame. Elena ran desperately, using her knowledge of the terrain to try to lose her pursuer. The man didn't run. He moved methodically, like someone who knows every inch of the valley and knows that there is no real escape. After hours of exhausting escape, Elena found an abandoned forest road. Following her, he eventually reached a ranger hut occupied by a couple of mountaineers who immediately noticed her panicked state. Subsequent investigation revealed a disturbing story. For more than 30 years, visitors to the valley had occasionally disappeared. Authorities attributed the disappearances to natural dangers in the region. The cabin belonged to Malcolm Fraser, a former nature photographer who had isolated himself after a mental breakdown in the 1990s. He had turned his art into an unhealthy obsession, collecting images and belongings of visitors to the valley, some of which were never seen again. The empty camp. The Canadian summer sun was beginning to set when Maya and Ethan Chen spotted the colorful tents in the valley below. Married for 3 years and seasoned adventurers, they were on the 4th day of a 7-day hike along the Skyline Loop in Jasper National Park, one of the most isolated routes in the Rocky Mountains. "Strange," Ethan commented, consulting his map. "There shouldn't be a designated campsite at this point." As they approached, they found 3 tents set up in a semicircle, completely abandoned. An extinct fire contained still warm ashes. Open. Backpacks, untidy sleeping bags, and working flashlights indicated a hasty and recent departure. Maya noticed small cut marks on the tent ropes and different footprints circling the perimeter of the camp. "Someone has been watching them," he whispered. Ethan found a map with an area circled in red and the inscription, "Investigate Ruins." A diary belonging to a woman called Rebecca revealed that she, her brother Michael and friend Jamie had noticed strange signs in the previous days: unofficial stone cairns, markings on trees, and the feeling of being followed. The last entry, read, "Michael insists on checking out the ruins we found on the map. We will leave the tent set up and return before dark." The couple decided not to stay there. They set up camp in a high place, where during the early hours of the morning, Maya saw human eyes watching them from the forest. In the morning, they discovered fresh footprints around their camp and a small cairn of stones that had not been there the night before, pointing in the direction of the ruins. Abandoning the planned trail, they began returning to the nearest entry point. On the way, they found a partially hidden cabin. Through the window, they saw maps with marked trails, stacked equipment, and secretly taken photographs of hikers. On the table, scattered documents and Rebecca's backpack. They were surprised by a tall man wearing camouflage clothes and a hunting rifle. "Visitors," he said calmly. "I rarely have 2 groups in 1 week." After a desperate escape, they reached a busy trail and met other hikers who led them to safety. The investigation revealed that Harold Mackenzie, a fired former ranger, had turned a remote section of the park into his hunting territory. For years, it attracted hikers with fake markings and mysterious ruins. Authorities found evidence linking him to at least 7 disappearances, including Rebecca and her companions. The case of the Jasper predator led to changes in the park's safety protocols. Maya and Ethan, although they still practice mountaineering, never again venture onto remote trails without tracking devices and without reporting their route in detail. For Rocky Mountain hikers, the warning remains: not all wilderness dangers are animals or avalanches. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that first patiently watches, studying their movements, waiting for the perfect moment to turn walkers into prey. The private island. The tropical sun shone brightly as the sailboat Horizon left. The port of Suva, the capital of Fiji. On board, 5 friends celebrated their reunion after years apart. Lucas, a successful businessman who organized the trip. Sophia, recently graduated doctor. Miguel, nature photographer. Camilla, corporate lawyer. And Daniel, university professor. The destination was Vaatu Island, a tiny spot on the map, supposedly uninhabited and perfect for camping for 3 days. "I discovered this island on a traveler's forum," explained Lucas. "They say it has untouched beaches and an incredible lagoon. After 6 hours of sailing, they saw the outline of the island, a volcanic formation covered in dense vegetation with white sand beaches and crystal clear waters. It felt like paradise. Anchored close to the beach, they noticed something unexpected: a small, well-maintained wooden dock. "Strange for an uninhabited island," commented Miguel, photographing the structure. Exploring the beach, they found more signs of human presence: well-marked trails, a recently extinguished fire, and markings on trees. Sophia found a sign partially covered by vegetation: "Private property. Unauthorized visitors will be prosecuted." "We should leave," Camilla suggested uncomfortably. "We are trespassing on private property." "Let's just camp for a night and leave early tomorrow," Lucas insisted. "Who will know?" They set up camp near the beach. During dinner, Daniel noticed a distant light between the trees. "Someone is watching," he whispered. At midnight, they were awakened by a blaring alarm. Powerful lights illuminated the camp, momentarily blinding them. When they regained their vision, they were surrounded by uniformed men. "Welcome to Vatu Island," announced a middle-aged man wearing crisp white linen. "I'm Alexander Reed, owner. You are my guests now." They were escorted along a trail until they reached a modern mansion, perfectly camouflaged in the vegetation. In the luxurious interior, Reed explained his situation. A technology billionaire, he had bought the island 10 years earlier, seeking isolation after a corporate scandal. "I rarely have visitors," he smiled, pouring champagne, "especially uninvited guests. But when they do show up, I offer hospitality and entertainment." The next morning, Reed proposed a game, a treasure hunt around the island. The prize: immediate freedom and generous financial compensation. The alternative: work on your property for a month as compensation for trespassing. With no real choice, they accepted the game. They received individual maps with different routes and were separated. The rules seemed simple, but they soon realized the true nature of Reed's entertainment. Miguel was the first to find disturbing evidence. In a coastal cave, he discovered belongings of other players: documents, clothes, photographic equipment, some dating back years. Sophia, following her route, found an isolated cabin containing detailed files on previous visitors, including information about the 5 friends collected before they even arrived on the island. Reed had been monitoring them for weeks. Daniel discovered hidden cameras throughout the island, transmitting to a control room in the mansion. Camilla found a makeshift cemetery with small, unmarked crosses. When Lucas reached his final destination, an abandoned lighthouse, he found Reed waiting. "Impressive," commented the billionaire. "Only 40% of participants make it this far." Reed then revealed his true obsession: studying human behavior under extreme stress. A former psychology professor, he had developed theories about survival that he tested on uninvited visitors. Some survived and were released after signing confidentiality agreements. Others became permanent statistical data, gathered again at the mansion. The 5 friends realized that the real game was just beginning. Reed offered a final choice. One of them would stay on the island permanently, allowing the other 4 to leave. They would have to decide who to sacrifice. What followed was a psychological battle where Reed meticulously exploited each other's weaknesses and secrets, trying to turn them against each other. On the 3rd night, during a tropical storm, they managed to overcome their differences and devise an escape plan. Using their combined knowledge, they temporarily deactivated the security system and reached their sailboat. Reed, furious at the breach of his standard, sent security in pursuit. During the desperate escape across the reef, Reed's boat collided with submerged rocks. When they returned to Suva, they alerted authorities. An international operation found the island hastily abandoned with evidence of multiple crimes. Reed had disappeared, taking his files. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving people lost in the middle of nowhere. So which one scared you the most? Will one make you double-check the map before your next trip? Tell us in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the scary world of isolation and disorientation, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more chilling stories. And if you are not yet registered, take the opportunity now to sign up and activate the bell.